Find insight, guidance, and answers. Tune into Spirit with radio medium Laura Lee.
Laura Lee, tuning in with my special guest expert, Dr. Haan, who is currently a visiting assistant professor in the School of Teacher Preparation, Administration, and Leadership at New Mexico State University. And her focus on research is social justice leadership related to educational leaders addressing racial equality and academic outcomes for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Welcome, Dr. Haan.
Hi, Laura. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for coming on to this show. I invited you onto the program to chat about the Thanksgiving tradition, given it's coming up this next week. And our country is so divided more than ever right now. And I wonder if this image that we were taught in school growing up about how we sat down as pilgrims and shared a feast with the Native Americans. And I want your take whether or not that was real or an imagined narrative taught to us in school. Because sometimes I wonder.
That's a really good question. And the answer really is it's both an imagined and a real narrative, but it all depends upon your perspective. And it's important to know about all different perspectives about historical events because it's important to know the truth. Really, the story of the Thanksgiving dinner is a beautiful story, and it upholds real deeds of good people and goodwill on the part, most famously, of the story of Squanto and the Pilgrims. But there's also another flip side to the story, which is not so great. And that truth has to do with the fact that European settlers did come to the continent of North America and did commit horrible acts of violence and subjugation of indigenous people. In addition, the truth about Thanksgiving includes the history of the United States, whose development as an economic power was based on chattel slavery, colonization of indigenous people, and the exploitation of labor immigrants to this country and eventually poor people. So there is a beautiful story behind traditions of Thanksgiving, but it just depends on the perspective.
Right, that's true. Given our current state, our country can still achieve despite some of the setbacks that we saw over the last year. Do you think there's a possibility for us to find some sort of common ground and unify our divisions?
Oh, absolutely. And I think Thanksgiving is a great time to reflect on that and to try to find ways to build that unity. And, we shouldn't be surprised right now that there's division. I mean, history has shown us time and again that any movement towards inclusion and social justice is met with a backlash by those who equate this inclusion and justice with taking away their freedoms and liberties. So there's a historic precedent for this. But there are things that we can do to restore our sense of peace and unity as a nation. And the first need, in my opinion, begins with understanding ourselves and our own positionalities in the world. So what I mean by that is that each of us needs to recognize that we have different levels of privilege based on our race, gender, sexuality, religion, income level, citizenship status, and a bunch of other identities. Mm-hmm. Once we understand ourselves, we can begin to then understand those who are different from us. Share our own stories about who we are, telling our own stories from our own perspective. And then we can listen to other stories without judgment. And that opens up this door to ask questions about how and why, we come to know something about our world and try to find those commonalities.
Yeah. And the first step in healing is awareness, but it seems like sometimes you have to take 2 steps back before we can take a step forward every time to advance.
Yeah, like Martin Luther King said, the arc towards justice is long and far, but it does bend towards justice. And it takes a while, and it's not something that's easy and it's going to happen overnight.
Right. So, Dr. Haan, with the holiday upon us and the pandemic's knocking at our doors, it's already difficult to unify with our family, let alone worry about unifying with a neighbor who might be of different color or different. How can we do our part individually to find some common ground and restore peace?
Yeah, again, it goes back to really reflecting on who you are as an individual and the positionalities you possess in the world. And then that definitely opens up the doors for you to begin a conversation with someone who may be different from you, just by simply asking about who they are, what they find important, what their family background is, how did they come to know and understand things in our world and the various perspectives. And we have to do that by reserving judgment. And that doesn't mean that everyone's going to be wonderful and nice and gracious, but we have to assume best intentions about people.
Right.
Otherwise, we'll never get started.
Oh, gosh, we've seen so much of that this year. I think bottom line, there's a lot of people who are unwilling even to pick up the phone and call a family member or a friend they lost through the division during this time. So, I think the only thing that's going to unite people is realizing there's only one race. It's the human race.
That is absolutely true.
Well, thank you for your sharing your time with us, Dr. Haan. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Laura.
Yeah, I wish we had more time. This is a heavy-duty subject, and don't forget to subscribe to the show. It is free.